They want to make one phone call, knock one door, make one video, send one email. And so let's talk about that. Let's shift gears and talk about creating success. And you have this 3-part framework where you talk about skills, traits, and beliefs. And so let's break each 3 of those down and talk about skills first, then we'll get into traits, and then we'll get into beliefs. So skills first, I think, is the easiest one to knock out. But for a salesperson, a real estate agent, somebody's that's direct B2C, what's the best way in your experience just for them to get better at sales?
I feel like this is like you're setting me up for the spike, which I appreciate. You got to do more. You know what I mean? Like, there, 10,000 cold calls will teach you significantly more about sales than any book ever will.
Amen.
And so, and I also think that it's better to do some selling and then read the books, because you'll have context to understand through which to understand the stuff you're learning. Like, if I read a sales book and I'd never sold, I would just I would read the words rapport building and not really get what that meant. I would read the word like objection overcome and not I'd be like, okay, I guess I got to remember this thing, but like, you don't have a framework to hang it on. So it's not useful, right? So once you make the dials, do the reach outs, do the cold emails, whatever it is, you will then get the opportunities to flex. And, you know, this is, it's not my statement, but repetition is the mother of skill. And so if you want to get skilled, you got to do the reps.
Yeah, I love it. We talk a lot about in our community, the learning is in the doing. I think you call it something different, but it's like, listen, dude, you can sit there and study the scripts all day long, but until you use it in the battlefield, nothing really is going to change. And so let's get into traits and beliefs, because I think there's a lot to unpack here. And so with traits, you know, you had gone deep at talking about three traits of like these wildly successful people. But I want to talk about specifically focus, delayed gratification, and simple scales, fancy fails. So let's get into focus first, because I think that when you talk about these entrepreneurs building a bunch of half-built bridges, I'm like, dude, that is freaking spot on, which then leads them to shiny object syndrome. So let's get into focus, and then we'll kind of unpack the other two.
Focus is tough, because the character trait that you had when you started your business was that you basically started it through shiny object syndrome. Like, the current opportunity you're in was the shiny object that got you out of the job or out of the, college, whatever it was, right? To start this thing. And so the problem is that human beings, if we get rewarded for something, we want to do it again, right? But the problem is that you only really need to innovate once, right? I mean, there's micro iterations, but macro iterations in terms of strategic changes, very few. And so the focus, like, I think there's this quote from Neil Strauss that I love, but he says, success comes down to doing the obvious thing for an inordinate amount of time, for an extraordinary period of time, without thinking you're smarter than you are. And so most people, like, it takes more commitment to the plan than a better plan, right? Like, most plans succeed if they are executed with vigor, right? Consistently for an extended time. Even mediocre plans, like a mediocre plan done for a decade beats a perfect plan done for a day. And most people don't do that, right? They continue to do a perfect plan for one day at a time. And they continue to use the aphorism that you used earlier, like the half-built bridges, right? Like, they start building a bridge, they get halfway across, and they're like, you know what, there's another part of the ravine that's closer, so I'm going to build another bridge. And then they get to that one, they're like, actually, there's another part of the thing that's closer. But the thing is, if they'd never left the first bridge, they would have finished it by the time they were starting their fourth one, right? And they'd have dollars coming across it. And so I think entrepreneurship, much the same way, is we get good by learning the details, and the details come through the repetition. It comes through putting brick by brick, assembling the bridge, right? And I think the easiest way to understand this is there's a 5-cycle change. There's kind of like the 5 grief stages. There's another one that's I can't remember where it is, but I'll tell you what they are. In the beginning, you have uninformed optimism. So that's the girl in the red dress who walks by. She looks sexy as hell. You're like, man, that looks easier. My buddy's trading crypto, right? Whatever.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yep. Sure.
And so it's uninformed optimism. Then you get in. And then as soon as you get in, you find out that there's hair. There's right? She's actually a little crazy. She wants all your money. You know what I mean? Underneath of there, she just knows how to wear spandex and is actually like kind of frumpy, right? And so it's now your informed pessimism. So now you know, and it's not as pretty as you want. Step 3 is the valley of despair, which is you continue down this path. and it just feels like it sucks. It feels like there's 100 problems. You don't know what to do. And so then what happens for most people? Another pretty girl walks by. And so then they start back over at uninformed optimism, and they run that 3-step cycle over and over again, right? But they miss out on step 4 and 5. So step 4 is informed optimism, is that you now understand where the bodies are buried. You understand the dirt, the hair that is involved in this particular opportunity and how to still overcome them. And then step 5 is that you realize the goal, right? You achieve what you originally set out to do. And then, of course, at that point, you reset your goal, you move the goalpost, whatever, and you do it again. But the thing is that most people, especially newer entrepreneurs, never get past step 3. They get to the valley of despair and then they jump ship. Part of that is because they were reinforced by the excitement of jumping ship the first time they did it. So they have this reinforcing behavior, which is hard to break, right? And so that's why it's very much a character thing. Like, you don't need to be more skilled to win. You just need to stick with it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, when you're talking to these entrepreneurs and in your experience, if you're mentoring somebody, what do you think the cure is for shiny object syndrome? What is it that you think, what is the character trait that one needs to really focus on to keep their head down and keep the main thing the main thing?
I think it's context.
Mm.
It's having a larger time horizon through which that you make your decisions, right? And so, like, when I'm talking, because, like, and this is for everybody, this happens at every level. So this happens at $1 million a year, at 10 million a year, at 100 million a year. Because
I'm fighting it right now.
Yeah, the girl in the red dress just gets hotter.
Yeah,
right. Like, that's all it is that the distraction, the shiny object gets shinier the better you get, right? And so, and part of this is, like, I wish I could give it to people so that, that's why I, do podcasts like this and whatnot. It's like, if I can give you the experience, which is like, give you the scar and give you the story so you don't need the scar, right? I have changed business directions multiple times. Every time I have done it, I have been negatively reinforced. I've been punished for doing so.
for sure.
And it just has taken enough punishment for me to realize that it's because I couldn't stick with it, which is why I'm so vehement about it. Because, like, I struggle with it today. I mean, right before we got on this call, I was like, we have 600 companies a month that reach out to try and do something, and we take one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's so hard. And the better you get, a year from now, it'll be 6,000. You know what I mean? And I still will have to stick with the original plan, which is, like, if we buy a few big, good companies, we don't need multiple Facebooks. We just need a few. And me trying to get 20 or 100 is what's going to distract from the few that will matter. Because when you look back on your life, and this is maybe the best perspective to solve it for the focus thing, is that when you look retroactively, there are probably only a handful of decisions that shaped your life. And that means that 99% of the shit you did basically didn't matter. And so it's making sure that the decision that you made, you force it to be one of the ones that mattered by sticking with it.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And, you said something about you had 9 companies at one time. And Layla's like, dude, what is wrong with you, man? Like, we don't need all these. And I was the same way. And my wife was saying the same thing to me. And Alex, after I watched you talk about that, we sold our brick and mortar companies and just focused on our e-learning space. And everyone was like, dude, what did you do? And I'm like, dude, we're going all in on one thing. We're focusing on the one thing. And just like you said, in your experience, it was the same for us. We took off. But entrepreneurs feel like they need to hedge against everything. I got to do this, I got to do that, because I don't know which one's going to take off. And
that's the fallacy.
That's
the fallacy, is that we think that I'm going to put 5 pots on the stove and I'm going to see which one pops first, when in reality, you only have enough fire to make one of them pop. Yeah. Right. And so you just have to pick which one you're going to put on the stove.
Yeah. Smart. Let's talk about beliefs, and specifically around, I'll call it self-development. We might want to call it something different, but specifically traditional education versus alternative education. Yeah. I love some of your worldviews on specifically the ignorant tax, which we're going to talk about, the SME 500 versus the S&P 500, and then the tale of 2 Jacobs, which is so good. So let's get into, because that's been my life. I've got a brother who's an attorney. I've got another brother who's got 2 double majors in psychology, and me, I have no formal education whatsoever, and they both work for me. And they're like, what the dude. You're the youngest one. You have no college. I'm like, yeah, dude, because I've spent more money than both of you on courses, mentorships, learning from people like you specifically. And that's why. So let's talk about the ignorant tax first. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a frame shift that at least has been very valuable for me to understand, which is that whatever I want, there is a cost to getting it. And so the first time I heard this was actually at somebody who was using it to close an event, and they were saying, and they wrote $1 million on the board, and they asked somebody in the audience how much they make, and I think they answered $50,000. And he said, and then he put $50,000 underneath the $1 million, and he drew a line, and they put 950,000. He said, it is costing you $950,000 every year to not know how to make $1 million.
Love that.
And that, like, he didn't call it ignorance tax. I've called it that since then. But like, you can put whatever number you want. It costs me $1 billion a year not to know how to make $1 billion a year in income, right? Now, caveat there is, like, if you do know how to do it and you feel like it just takes time, then sometimes you have to give time. But that idea for me has been fundamental to, like, I will pay for whatever shortcut possible. Now, I think the game has changed somewhat, which is that, like, education now, because of media, there's a lot of really good stuff that wasn't there 10 years ago. You know what I mean? Like,
true.
My hope is not to self-aggrandize here, but like the stuff that we share, like, that
Absolutely.
wasn't, like, there wasn't a lot of people out there who were actually doing stuff, who were just, sharing it. Right. And so there's a lot of opportunity to learn on your own. The piece that I think has been valuable is community. Community and kind of like debottlenecking. So it's kind of more the service side of what is commonly referred to as the coaching industry, which is really just consulting that hasn't been formalized yet. And I want to be clear, there are terrible ones.
For
there
sure.
are many, and I think it's honestly more the rule than the exception. But there is value in someone helping you get somewhere faster. And making sure that that person has helped people like you get to where you want to go is a great first litmus test to look through that, right? And then the third piece is kind of the community piece, which is, for me, from a belief standpoint that you were alluding to earlier, I've gotten my biggest breakthroughs have come from community over anything else. And watching someone that I thought I had the same chops as, or better chops, do better than me. And then think, if he can do it or she can do it, I can do it.
Makes sense.
And that has been very intrinsic to me. Now, some people don't have that belief, like, at their core, which I would recommend. I believe, like, everybody's made of skin and bones, and, like, if someone else can do it, so can I. And that's a belief, though. You know what I mean? But that has been very valuable for me. And the many people throughout my life that have spoken small pivots in the road that have, resulted in huge changes. When we went from scaling brick and mortar to licensing, like, that was a huge change in my life. When we even went to go pursue what we're doing now, just through M&A and private equity, like, that was a huge change in my life. And much of those decisions came through dialogue with people who were further ahead.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is I continue to, and I told you this before we started this interview, that our team studies your work, and we will continue to do that. But from what I see from afar, you went to Vanderbilt. I don't know what that cost you, right? And you also invested a lot of money into mentorship. And I don't want to assume anything, but I would venture to say that the money you put into mentorship got you a lot further than what you spent at Vanderbilt. Would that be safe?
For sure. And one of the things that I was talking to my team about today, actually, is that it got me a lot further, partially because of who I am. And I'm not saying that, again, to self-aggrandize, but I say that because there are many people who pay money and get nothing out of either of them. And that's because they don't do anything.
That's a good point.
And so I like to just be very clear that, like, nothing is going to save you. You know what I mean? Like, it's all going to come down to you. And when I go into anything, I try and say, I'm going to be number one. I will be the best student here. And I will not fail for lack of effort or execution. And those are just agreements I have with myself, because I want to know that I want to eliminate myself as the variable in the success in whatever endeavor I have. So I want to make sure that the plan, not my execution on the plan, is the problem. If I don't now, and to be fair, in every one of those communities that I ever did join, I ended up becoming number one, and take that for what it is, but that was an agreement that I made with myself when I started. And oftentimes I was not even close to the top or even the middle when I joined those places. And so I say that to just add a little bit of color to it. But yes, I do think that the formal education system as a whole is a terrible return at this moment for the vast majority of people who are not going to be a lawyer, a doctor, an accountant, the other 99% of people. And I think that the reason that the e-learning, coaching, guru, et cetera, space has proliferated, has grown, is because demand for income generating skills hasn't gone away, right?
Right,
It's just
right.
that the supply of where they came from has shifted. And so because of media, because of the distribution of platforms, people can teach real skills to others for free. They're free
Mhm.
communities. There's other things too. But at the end of the day, we have to pay the ignorance tax down. We can pay with time, we can pay with money, we can pay with both. And for
Well,
me, I will pay with whatever it costs to move faster.
yeah, and you did bring up a great point though that I want to make sure the audience doesn't miss is just because you do go to a great mentor and give them your credit card doesn't mean all your problems go away. You still got to do the work. And so that was a great point. So let's talk about sales skills, something I think that you and I both share passionately. There are 4 skills specifically that I hear you talk about most. Those are transference of beliefs through conviction, labeling, selling the vacation, and then the sacrificial lamb. So I want to break these 4 down because there's so many things that are congruent with what we teach. So let's talk about your belief around what I think you believe sales is to be, which is from the highest level is really one's ability to transfer belief to another person through conviction. Can you speak to that?
Yes. Um, it's so funny because the next book is on sales and I've already like started outlining it.
I can't wait.
I can't wait either. And I think it will not be what people expect it to be. I'll put it that way.
I love it.
But like, I mean, even I'm going to say something right now that might break some people's brains, but I also have now, I think, adopted a belief that hard sales is bad branding.
Mm,
Like if you have to sell hard because you don't have a brand. And so I learned all the hard sales skills because I didn't have one. And it was because I lacked the skill, right? This was, I didn't understand, or you can call it a
sure.
belief, that brand mattered. And now, like, my beliefs have changed such to the point where I think brand is more important than everything. Brand is everything. So I say that with that caveat first. That being said, if you truly believe in what you sell, selling is actually very easy. The problem is that people are either selling stuff they don't believe in, right? Or actually, it's really just that.
Yeah.
Like they sell stuff they don't believe in. It's either their own stuff or it's somebody else's. But either way, they're not wholeheartedly convicted. When you refer a friend to a pair of pants or like a shoe that you like, you
It's
sell the
easy.
right way.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
love it.
because you believe in it, right? And also because if they don't do it, you don't really care. You're like, I'm just telling you. Like, you want it, awesome, right? And so if you truly believe, which is where I would put where I put my attention on a sales team is on the conviction more than anything. Because if you get that right, the tonality, where they pause, their demeanor, the frame they hold on the call is the right frame, is the right tone. And you don't even need to train it because they do it innately as humans if they know how to communicate. And so more of my sales, like as I understand it now, because I think my viewpoints shift over time, is really just very succinct and clear communication with another human being. And if you can do that, most people, if you listen to sales calls, I'm sure you have, because I'm sure you have a sales team now. If you listen to some of these calls, you're like, how did this close? Like,
Yep.
this is a train wreck, right?
Yep.
Because many people hop on the call ready to buy, and
Yep.
salespeople give themselves credit for making a sale when really they just transacted. And
Yep.
so oftentimes it's just clear thinking in a framework that we can apply consistently. And so if you believe in the thing, then you're going to say, hey, I believe that we can help you. And if they believe you too, which comes from trust, they will buy if they have the ability to do so. Right.
Love it.
And that's from a first principle standpoint. You have to believe it. Well, you don't have to. It helps. Right. And then you transfer that belief to the other person. They now believe it. And then if they have the means, they will buy.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And one of the things I was just working on with my sales team just this week is labeling, and it's made a huge, massive impact. Can you just take a minute or two and help the audience really understand what is labeling, and then
Yeah.
maybe give an example?
Yeah. Labeling is honestly just really good psychology in general to understand because it has far greater implications than just sales. Like it's very helpful in identifying objections early that a prospect will have. later.
100%.
So for example, I like using weight loss because everybody understands it. If I were selling a gym membership of some sort or a weight loss program, whatever, and Judy Luhu, right, says, I did Weight Watchers. And I would say, okay, how'd that work for you? And then she might say, I loved the program, but it was really expensive, right? Now, I know that my is way more expensive than Weight Watchers. So what do we do from here? I haven't even gotten to the presentation of our stuff. I haven't even gotten into closing. Like, what do I do? I have to confront the label that she just put on her experience, and I have to crack it. Otherwise, there's no point in getting further in the sale because I have to overcome this now. Otherwise, it'll detonate in the close, right? And so I would
Absolutely.
say, so you said it was expensive. What made you say that? So now she's labeled it, right? And I have to now change that label, right? Like what made it expensive? Well, I mean, it was $39 a month. Well, I mean, how much does your wardrobe cost? How many pieces of clothing have you bought that you now no longer can wear as a result of that? If you could get 10 more years on your life, what's the value of that? What's the value of your high school weight?
Mm.
Oh my God, that'd be so valuable. So then was it really not expensive, or was it that you didn't get what you wanted out of it? I didn't get what I wanted out of it. Okay, just to be clear, because if you did get the high school and you did get the clothing, blah, 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 it would have been worth 10 times that, right? Right. Done. Right.
Love it.
We relabeled it. And so we have to be clear with language so that we can close later. Now, from the labeling perspective, as you're referencing it, that's kind of reactive labeling, what I just said. There's also proactive labeling, which is that you can then ascribe traits to somebody else earlier on in the sale that they will find positive. So it's like, hey, you seem like a very family-oriented person, or you seem like a very growth-oriented individual. It seems like you are willing to take risks in order to grow your business, right? These are all labels that we're going to ascribe. And the thing is, you'll know it's a label because the person has to agree. They're going to say, yes, I am that way. Yes, I agree with that statement, right? And then from that statement, you pocket that later so that when it comes to the close, you'll be like, because you said you're this type of person, X. And because of commitment and consistency, which is like a psychological thing, Cialdini talks about it,
Yep.
people are more likely to comply with something that makes them appear consistent with their own commitments, right? And so they committed earlier to this label, and we made it a positive association. People will want to live up to that positive association. And so I used this in a different example when in a non-monetary, it was monetary, but I wasn't making any money from it. I was treasury of an organization when I was in college. And there was one member who was notorious for not paying. All right.
Mm.
And he was, everyone was like, this guy's a piece of shit. Blah, 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 blah. Like you'll never get it, right? Because every treasurer before me had never gotten this guy to pay dues, right? And so the first thing I did when I started Treasures, I met up with him, and he expected that I was going to berate him, which is what everybody else had done. Been called him a bunch of names and telling me he was a low life, blah. And so I said, hey man, I know that you're a rock solid individual. I was like, and you're honest. I was like, so I'm just not going to bother you about this because I just know you're good for it.
So
He
strong.
came the next day and paid in cash for the whole thing and his back dues. Because I gave him because if he doesn't do it, then he's not going to get the association that I just gave him, right?
That's right.
And so you can massively influence behavior and also give people legitimate compliments at the same time, which is what makes it so powerful. And to be clear, the way to use this ethically is not to lie about the association that you're making for the person.
Sure. I mean, that's great. I mean, it's changed everything, Alex, for us. I mean, that whole skill has been incredible. So selling the vacation probably could be a whole podcast by itself, but I want people to understand when you say sell the vacation, just what you mean, so the audience understands that we need to focus on the desired outcome, not how we get to that desired outcome.
Yeah, I'll give the analogy because that's
Perfect.
what it was based on. So if you listen to most salespeople sell, or most business owners sell their products and services, they will describe the plane flight. So they describe TSA, take your shoes off, take your pants off. The person next to you, it's going to smell like crap. It's going to be a 5-hour flight. On the flight, this is what we're going to serve. You'll be able to get up to the bathroom 2 or 3 times. We'll have refreshments. Once I tell you that you can't check in, blah, 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 right? Which translates to, this is going to be our communication cadence. This is the deliverables that you're going to have. This is what you owe us. This is what we owe you. This is the time to blah, 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 right? These are our programs. These are, the deliver, whatever. Versus, let me tell you about Maui. Maui has white sand beaches where you're going to be able to sit on them and they're not going to hurt your feet because there's no rocks in them, right? We have one of the softest suns on the planet. So you actually won't have to put nearly as much sunscreen on. So you're not going to get burned. You actually get the nice, beautiful tan that you look for. So your pictures are going to come out amazing, right? It's great for Instagram. You'll be able to remember this vacation. You'll be able to enjoy it leading up to it. You'll be able to enjoy it while you're there, and you're going to enjoy the memories for the rest of your life, right? Both of them are selling the same thing. One of them, we're selling the plane flight on how they're going to get there. The other one, we're selling the experience of what it's going to be like to enjoy the benefits once they have arrived. And so when we are selling, we almost don't have to talk at all about the deliverables. We talk almost exclusively about the experience of the benefits, not just the benefits, but the experience of them, right? Because that's what they want.
Because
right?
people make decisions emotionally, right? And
Yeah.
so that is so good. It's so strong.
I will say this, because this is something that I've learned in time, is
Sure.
that the higher the acumen of the more sophisticated the buyer, the less emotional the pitch is.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah,
That's
100%.
just something I've now learned from the M&A world and like dealing with bankers and
Yeah.
things like that. Like if you're selling, there is a story for sure. There's still that element,
Yeah.
but it still has to have the rock hard. But like if you're selling stuff for under $100,000,
There you go.
you're probably fine just focusing on the vacation of what they're going to experience when they're there.
Yeah, fair enough. So we only have another minute or two. So the whole sacrificial lamb, we call it speaking against your own interests, which is the easiest way to build trust and rapport. And so you talk about it's one of the easiest ways to build trust in a sales conversation is to speak against your own interest. You call it the sacrificial lamb. Can you give us an example of that?
Well, I mean, I learned this accidentally. So we
Right.
ran out of product one day, and I had sold, the first half of people that walked in that day, the product, and then friends from the people from that first half came later, and I didn't have it. And so I was like, you know what? Go down the street, get it there. It's going to be cheaper. It's not going to be as good as our thing, but like it'll get you through the first, 2 months or whatever. And then what I realized is after I said that, people would like they'd write down the address, they'd write down the place. They're like, okay, got it. And they'd be like, but what you do need is take 2 of these in the morning, take 2 of these in the afternoon, and what flavor do you want? You want to use the cards you have in file. And I closed like 100% the rest of the day. And I was scratching my head. I was like, what was different here? And I realized that because I had spoken against my own best interest, to your point, I like calling it just damaging admissions, right?
Okay.
Where you speak against the things that most people would try and pump up about themselves.
Right.
And then you make your ask. The compliance on the request after a damaging admission skyrockets. And so you can use that when you're scripting the sale, specifically before statements of belief that you want someone to agree with, right? So if you're like, listen, man, I will say this. Ours is like our service offering is going to take you more time than probably the competition, right? Like they're going to be a little bit more done for you than we are. There's going to be a lot more work on your side. Here's a bunch of things that suck. All right. But we'll get you significantly higher returns by a wide margin on an ongoing basis for the remainder of your time. So the first 60 days, you're going to make more money with the other guy. But from every day after day 60, we will beat it.
So strong.
When you say that, you know what I mean? If I just said, if I took the first part out and then just said, you're going to get better return, like you can hear it right now. If I just said,
that's exactly
you're going to
right.
get better returns with me than the other guy, you don't believe it.
No,
right?
Resistance.
Right. And so if you put that, and the nice thing here, and this is what I tell anybody who's a business owner or salesperson, is be honest. What are the things that you actually are not as good at? Or what are the downsides of there's always, like every upside has a downside, right? Like if you're really customized, it's probably going to be slower, right? Or they're not going to get as much time with you, but it is more custom. Like there's always trade-offs to every coin, right? Quality and quantity. Like there's just always a trade-off. Just speak to the opposite side of the coin before you tell them the thing you want them to believe, and people will believe it significantly more.
Fair enough. Alex, dude, I appreciate you very, very much. We love the work that you're doing. Can't wait to see what comes out of the acquisition.com camp. And we're really looking forward to it, and we appreciate your time today.
Thank you to the audience for having me. I appreciate your attention. I know it's you have many places to fly and spend it, so thanks for spending it with us today.
Appreciate you, brother. Take care.